Thank you, Chairman Shimkus, for allowing me to participate in the hearing today. Mr. Pruitt, your pattern of unethical conduct and conflicts of interest are now very well known. But I'm very troubled today by your failure to take personal responsibility for your actions. You simply dismissed all of the ethical lapses at the beginning of your testimony as troubling media reports. So I think that's a failure in leadership. But the point I want to make today is that those costs, your wasteful spending, those costs pale in comparison to the damage you are doing to the health of American families and the assault on our clean air and clean water protections, our protections against dangerous chemicals and pesticides. Mr. Pallone highlighted the issue of the dangerous paint stripper methylene chloride at the beginning that is known to have caused over 50 deaths, and yet the EPA under your administration now has, you say, we're stalled, we don't have a final decision, but in essence, you've turned a blind eye to those families. There's also the case of chlorpyrifos, which is a dangerous nerve agent. It's in the same chemical class as sarin. There was a recommendation by EPA scientists when you came in fact, the last administration had said we're going to propose very significant restrictions, especially to protect babies, children, young people under 18. You came in and turned that around. You said, oh, well, this is, well, it's not final. But you've set a pattern here. America's pediatricians are outraged, public health advocates are outraged, and so am I, because we're talking about the development of the brain in babies and children. We're talking about not just children that might be in farmlands, but they live and work or they live and play in those areas. There were a lot of kids in the audience today and parents who care about this a great deal. It's Take Your Child to Work Day. That was good to have them in here. So my first question is, why are corporate polluter profits more important to you than the health of families and children?
Well, on the issue that Ranking Member Pallone brought up and this issue that you've raised, I would ask you not to jump to conclusions that there's a final process there. That, as you know, the previous administration
But there's a pattern. There is a pattern. And,
I'm trying to respond.
You know, your actions belie what you say. When your EPA scientists and public health advocates and pediatricians all say, here's the ban, and you come into office and time again, you're siding with a special interest and not with the public.
Yet, that solvent that you're referring to is actually one of the 10 priority chemicals that we're reviewing under TSCA that you authorized. And
you're right, and that was a recommendation. That was the action of this committee, and you've set the pattern. And really, whatever you could say today, I think people need to look at your actions rather than your rhetoric. But in addition to your failure to take any responsibility, I have to say that I'm disappointed in a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that have let the administrator off the hook today by barely asking any tough questions. There were a few exceptions, and my hat's off to them. Maybe they're trying to save his job because they're worried if he doesn't perform well today, he could be fired. Several congressional Republicans have already publicly called for your firing, but unfortunately not on this committee. Either way, it's embarrassing that most of the Republicans refuse to take this committee's oversight responsibility seriously and hold you accountable. They claim to have requested documents from the administration regarding Administrator Pruitt's misconduct and conflicts of interest, but there's no evidence of any investigation. Meanwhile, the Democrats in this committee, we have sent numerous inquiries to EPA, the Office of Inspector General, the GAO, the Office of Special Counsel, and some of those have borne out, and you've been found in violation of the law. Unfortunately, we have yet to see any real effort from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. So I've been keeping a list today as well, Mr. Administrator, of the unanswered questions because you often say it's not final, we're looking at this, the jury's out, but you failed to give direct responses on a number of questions. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit this list for the record of the endless string of questions that Administrator Pruitt has not answered today.
Let us look at that. Pass it over here, please.
Will do. And finally, close out by saying.
Gentlelady's time's
Mr.
expired.
Pruitt, you violated. the
Gentlelady's
public
time's expired. Chair recognizes